Hey guys, what's up? So this is Ctrl-Alt-Awesome.com, Rakume here. So I'm here today with a review of Whispers of the Old Gods, the new Hearthstone expansion coming out probably in about a month or so, along with the release of Standard. So, those of you who may be watching this video and aren't familiar with me or haven't seen some of my admittedly not so numerous videos out there on YouTube may be saying, well, what the hell makes this guy so qualified to talk about Hearthstone and why should I listen to him? Well, good point. So, I'm not as well known, I guess you would say, as some of the streamers out there, or actually all of the streamers out there, because, I don't stream Hearthstone. But I have been playing the game for about 2 years now, and it has become a pretty big part of my gaming life. I play it on mobile, I play it on PC, and it's pretty much the only game I play anymore. And that's not saying a lot, because I have basically 1.5 full-time jobs, and I'm very busy. I only have time to play Hearthstone, maybe, 2 or 3 times a week for an hour or so at a time. And so, as such, my rank is not that great. I've never hit Legend. Back when I was playing more often, I was consistently, right around a rank 5 player. Recently, it's been more like rank 10 or so. Again, I'd like to think that that's not because of my lack of skill at the game, but rather just the fact that I can't put in the time it takes to get to Legend. Which is unfortunate. I've hit rank 1 a few times, as I said, but never quite hit Legend, so that's unfortunate. But I do know what I'm talking about, especially with Warlock and Mage. I have a lot of experience with those two classes. I do have the Gold Warlock Portrait, working on getting the Golden Mage one now, playing a lot of Freeze Mage, so my insights on those two particular classes I would consider to be extremely good. Classes that I don't play so often would be Hunter and Shaman. So, admittedly, a little bit less experienced with those two classes. So, you might want to take what I say with a grain of salt when it comes to those classes. But yeah, it's been pretty hard to find time to play the game recently. I've got a 2-month-old now, so a lot more of this kind of gaming going around. So, it's unfortunate. But anyway, so if you haven't been living under a rock completely, then you're familiar with the fact that with the release of Whispers of the Old Gods, or sometime around the same time, Blizzard's going to be unleashing the standard format. And the standard format is going to be a new mode of play where only the most recent year's expansions and the previous year's expansions are going to be available for play. And if you want to play older expansions, those are going to be available in the wild format. So what we're going to do in this particular card review is we're going to look at each card in 3 different ways. So the first thing we're going to do is evaluate it for standard, then we'll evaluate it for wild, and then finally we'll evaluate for arena. And I think that should cover everything just great for all you guys out there. So, with no further ado, let's get started with the Whispers of the Old Gods review. Alright, so we're going to start with the class cards, and then we're going to get into the neutrals, and then we're going to look at the Cthulhu cards and the class-specific Cthulhu cards together. I did this presentation about a week ago, so any cards that were released after about April 1st are not going to be contained in this presentation. They'll be contained in a future review that I'll be doing. Of course, all the cards have not been unveiled yet, so there will be future reviews covering those cards as well. First card, a Paladin card. So, Stand Against Darkness. Summon 5 1/1 Silverhand Recruits. Now, a lot of you guys probably look at this card and say, oh my gosh, it's Muster for Battle. Only a lot worse, right? You don't get the Light's Justice, and the Light's Justice gives you a lot of value, right? Basically, you can deal 1 damage 4 times, plus you get the 3 1/1s, which combos really, really well, of course, with like Quartermaster and other Paladin buff cards. Of course, Paladin's a very heavy buff class, and you drop Muster on 3, you drop Blessing of Kings or other bullshit on 4, and you piss off your opponent and win the game, right? But this card is significantly worse because of the fact that it costs 5 mana. So you're going to play this on 5 and you're going to hope to buff it with kings on 6 or something like that, or maybe play quartermaster or something like that on the next turn. The problem is that once you play this on 5, all the classes have access to all of their AoE and stuff like that, and it's just not going to work. And 5 mana is just way too late to summon 5/1/1s. It can be comboed with Quartermaster at 10 mana, but of course I think that that's way too late in the game for this kind of thing. But it's an interesting card, and it's certainly not terrible. So with that being said, without knowing all the Paladin cards that are coming out, it's really hard to evaluate this card simply because in Standard, Paladin is going to be losing Muster for Battle, they're going to be losing Shielded Minibot, they're going to be losing, of course, Quartermaster. They technically stand to lose the most core strong cards of any class in Hearthstone, based on what we know now. With the release of Standard, certain class basic and classic cards might see some nerfs, but because we don't know exactly what those nerfs are yet, it's also pretty hard to evaluate a card like this. It's possible that in Standard we might see some kind of Quartermaster 2.0, but if we don't see something like that, I think this card is just going to be terrible in Standard. So if I had to evaluate it for Standard right now, it's just not good enough, and it's unfortunate. In Wild, it's okay. It might make it into a mid-range Paladin deck along with 2 Muster for Battles and 1 or 2 Stand Against Darkness. Along with 2 Quartermaster. I could see something like that seeing play. However, it's really slow. In Arena, it's worse. It's pretty much strictly worse than Ball of Spiders unless you have buff cards to back it up. So unless you have significant amounts of buff cards, I don't see this seeing a lot of play in Arena either. It's just too slow. It's only giving you 5/1/1s. Any kind of AoE takes care of them. And if your opponent has any kind of board whatsoever, which of course by 5 mana they're going to, it's just too slow. Yeah, I don't see this card working well in Arena either. And it's sad because, again, Paladins are losing those tools. They're losing so many tools that we want to see them get so many good things in this expansion, but so far I'm not seeing it, unfortunately. The Paladin legendary card is Ragnaros Lightlord. Now, some people have been coming out and saying that, oh my god, this card is a lore abomination, right? Well, but Hearthstone is a humorous look at the world of Warcraft, right? And it's kind of a funny take on the Warcraft universe. And there's a lot of humor in the game, so I'm not quite as pissed off as some people about this card, With that being said, though, Ragnaros Lightlord, it's, besides being just a completely ridiculous concept, is a pretty bad card, I have to say. Basically, it's an 8 mana 8/8, restore 8 health each turn until it's killed. Of course, so basically what it is 8 mana 8/8, take a big game hunter and restore 8 health to some random damaged friendly character. Now that could be your face, it could be another minion that's taken 1 damage and so you're overhealing by 7 and you're losing the value that way. But it can also heal itself, I'm assuming, which is good. So you can smack something, and if you have no other minions on the field, it has a 50% chance to heal itself back up to full health, which is not terrible, actually. But with that being said, I don't really see Ragnaros Lightlord seeing much play in Constructed. So in Standard and in Wild, I would have to say that Ragnaros Lightlord is just not good enough. Especially if Big Game Hunter stays the way it is right now, it's just going to get BGH'd and you wasted 8 mana for no reason. Now, of course, you're going to directly compare this card to Tyrion, which also costs 8 mana. It's an 8 mana 6/6 Divine Shield. So that Divine Shield is going to take, at least 1 damage from your opponent. In the case of classes that have a 1 mana damage hero power, it's going to take 2 mana from your opponent to remove that Divine Shield. Then they have to run something else into it or have some kind of removal to destroy it. BGH doesn't work on Tyrion. And then you get Ashbringer, unless they silence Tyrion, which is huge value for 8 mana, and Ragnaros is just providing some kind of healing effect, which I don't think is good enough to see playing Constructed. Now, again, we haven't seen all the cards, so it'll be interesting to come back and look at it after the entire set has been unveiled, but for now, it's terrible in Constructed in general. In Arena, you would pick Fossilized Devilsaur, you would pick Ironbark Protector, so I think you would pick Ragnaros Lightlord too, but you're not going to be that excited about it. Steward of Darkshire, 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever you summon a 1 health minion, give it Divine Shield. Okay, so, with GVG, we saw the release of Hobgoblin, right? So Hobgoblin was 3 mana and give any 1/1 minion that you play +2/+2. So it's interesting in that, in this case, it's whenever you summon a 1 health minion, meaning that it works specifically with the Paladin hero power, and it works with the card we looked at before, Stand Against Darkness. So basically for 8 mana, you can have 5 1/1s with Divine Shield on the board, which is interesting, but it's still not great. So, in Constructed, I see this card seeing some play in some kind of fringe fun decks that people are going to try out, just like how Hobgoblin never really became competitively viable, but people still like to play around with it simply because it was fun to make decks around summoning. In that case, it was 1 attack minions, but of course in this case it's 1 health minions. And it's interesting that you can play cards like Loot Hoarder, for example, with Steward of Darkshire, and you can give it Divine Shield, right? You can play Magma Rager with Steward of Darkshire with a 5 attack Divine Shield minion, and I mean that's not nothing. And it's possible that I'm wrong, and it's possible that this could actually become somewhat of a thing, especially with other cards that could then replenish the Divine Shield, of course, like Argent Protector or something like that. It'll be interesting. Seal of Champions comes to mind. It would be interesting to see if something like this, a Divine Shield deck, all Divine Shield or mostly Divine Shield, could actually be viable. So to look at it, of course, it's interesting, of course, because it means that any 1 health minion that you summon basically is going to at least take 2 mana from your opponent, or it's going to take your opponent running a guy into it to remove the Divine Shield, and then they have to kill it off using their hero power or something like that. So it does add value to all of your minions. However, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. In the case of Standard, I'm going to value this card pretty lowly for now. I'm a little bit optimistic to see some fun decks come out of it, but I don't think it's going to be competitively viable in most decks. 3 mana 3/3 is not great, so it's just going to get taken out pretty easily by your opponent, and in order to use this, you're looking to combo it with something else, like, of course, Stand Against Darkness comes to mind, but in Wild, you'd be able to combo this with Muster for Battle at 6 mana, which is significantly better. It would be interesting to see if, like, a Thorson discounted hand could play something like Quartermaster, Steward of Darkshire, and Muster for Battle, and then you have a bunch of 3/3 Divine Shield minions on the board. It'd be interesting. Okay, so on to Priest. So Herald Volage, 6 mana 5/5, so that's pretty shitty. So we're looking for a really, really good battle cry, right? So the battle cry is summon a 1/1 copy of each of your other minions. Interesting. So, of course, this is essentially a mass Faceless Manipulator, only it sucks in the fact that it's going to summon a 1/1 copy of each of your other minions. So of course you're looking to combo this with things like cards with useful death rattles or useful effects. The problem is that in Priest, those are somewhat minuscule, and especially in the new standard format, which is losing Naxxramas, we're losing a lot of valuable death rattles. So I honestly don't think that this card is going to be all that great in Constructed, especially due to the fact that it's summoning a 1/1 copy, which can, of course, easily be taken out by just about anything. And at 6 mana, you're not going to really be able to combo then those effects with anything else on the same turn that you play it. And of course, then once your opponent gets the turn, they're just going to kill them all off anyway. But, you know, it might be interesting, like, if your Emperor Thorson survives, you copy it, and then you get another, like, a triple discount or something like that. There'll be some really, really fun, like, Trollden moments that come out of this card, and I'm sure people are going to experiment with it, but overall, I just don't see it being competitively viable. If you wanted to copy one of your minions, you would just run Faceless Manipulator anyway and make a full health copy of it, and it would be a lot better, because of course you're most likely looking to make a 1/1 copy of one very specific minion in order to double up on its effect. And so because of that, I don't think it's going to be very good in Constructed, and that goes for Wild and Standard. In Arena, you know, it's not bad. I mean, you're getting a lot of value. 6 mana 5/5. If you had 2 other minions on the board, you're essentially getting a 6 mana 7/7. If they have death rattle effects or other useful effects, you're potentially gaining more value, which is not bad, I think. So you at least need to have 2 other minions on the board, I think, for this card to be worth running. But that being said, you might pick it over some other shitty legendaries. Legendaries in Arena tend to be pretty bad anyway, so you know this one's not bad. I think that in Arena it's viable. It's not the best, but it's not bad either. It's okay. Shadow Word Horror, 4 mana, destroy all minions with 2 or less attack. Now, notably, Priest is losing Light Bomb in Standard, so we're looking for ways to kind of replace that and give Priest more AoE for the control deck that people like to seem to like to run with Priest. Unfortunately, this one is just not gonna do it. Unfortunately, destroy all minions with 2 or less attack for 4 mana is gonna work well with like Paladin 1/1s and things like that, but overall, a lot of minions have 3 attack, and I mean, even a lot of 2 mana minions have 3 attack, and the chance that you're going to be able to significantly destroy enough minions with Shadow Word Horror in order to make this card worth running is just so low. I mean, it's so situational, right? That all minions have 2 or less attack. It's not like Priest has a card like Paladin has that can set all minions attack to 1, and then you play Shadow Word Horror and kill the board on your enemy's side, right? Like a massive Flame Strike. Priest currently doesn't have a card like that. So, of course, this card is terrible. That being said, again, we haven't seen the entire set yet, so it will be interesting to see if Priest picks up a card like that along the way. And if they do, this card could be reasonable. It will be also interesting to see if Blizzard does release another like Light Bomb 2.0. Right now, of course, Priest has Holy Nova, which is meh, and they have Excavated Evil, which is meh, kind of Hellfire, sort of. And it's okay, but it's not Light Bomb, right? So it'll be interesting to see if they feel that the current meta warrants having another massive AoE in Priest. That's not Shadow Word Horror. In Arena, same thing. It's pretty bad. Yeah, in Constructed it's bad. In Arena, it's pretty bad. You wouldn't pick it over pretty much any other card. It's pretty bad. Warrior. So it looks like they're trying to push Face Warrior a little bit, and it looks like they're trying to give it the pirate theme, which is interesting. So N'Zoth's First Mate, Battle Cry, equip a 1/3 Rusty Hook is not bad. Yeah, I mean, I would run this in a face deck. That being said, Face Warrior is not really a thing, but if it ever became a thing, in Constructed, both Wild and Standard, this card's pretty good. Yeah, you would run it, definitely, as a 1 mana, essentially 1 mana deal at least, 4 damage is pretty reasonable, I think. Yeah, good card. In Arena, depends. If you're lacking in the early game, yeah, I think you would run it, especially if you don't have a lot of other weapons. So yeah, reasonable, pretty good card. I like it. Of course, Pirate Synergy helps. Although most notably, Ship's Cannon's going to be leaving Standard, so that makes it a little bit less good to build an actual pirate deck in Constructed, but I still think it's a reasonable card if you're looking to run Face Warrior. Again, that deck doesn't currently exist, but it'll be interesting to see if other things come out that make it a little bit more viable. Tentacles for Arms, 5 mana 2/2 Death Rattle, return this to your hand. So this is an infinite weapon because there's no way to silence weapons. There's no way to screw with them in any other way. If you, for example, play Harrison Jones on Tentacles for Arms, yeah, it gets destroyed, but it also goes back to their hand. They can spend 5 mana to play it again. Now, at first glance, this seems like a horrible card. 5 mana for essentially deal 4 damage and take a bunch of damage with your face is not the best. However, I think that the infinite value potential of this card will make it see play in extreme Fatigue Warrior decks, and I'm not sure if it'll be able to find a slot for it, but it's possible that, especially with the fact that Deathspite is leaving Warrior, that something like Tentacles for Arms would be played, simply because those games are going to go to the extreme late game, and they oftentimes spend their turn just armoring up and passing anyway, just trying to get the game to go into Fatigue. So something else that they could do with their mana is play Tentacles for Arms and then hit the opponent's face for 2 damage. And if you're in a Fatigue War with your opponent, sometimes 2 damage consistently over the course of the game could make a big difference. And so it'll be interesting to see, once all the set is revealed, if this card has a place in those kind of decks. So I think that in both Standard and Wild, in those extreme Fatigue Warrior decks, especially in Standard, since Deathspite is leaving, Tentacles for Arms is a reasonable card in those specific extreme Fatigue Warrior decks. In Arena, you're probably not going to pick this card. It's a little bit too slow, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm actually kind of excited about the idea of an infinite weapon. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so on to Rogue. Undercity Huckster. 2 mana, 2/2, Death Rattle, add a random class card to your hand from your opponent's class. So essentially mini Nefarian, right? I mean, this card is not a battle cry, it is a Death Rattle, and so it's going to add a random class card to your hand. Now this could be a spell, or it could be a minion. So I mean, you play this against Paladin and you could copy Tyrion, and that would be really, really insane, right? But you could also copy something like Eye for an Eye, and then you'd be really sad. But I think that the extreme swing potential that it has, I mean, Rogue has been missing some kinds of cards, some good cards recently, and so I think that this card, especially in the Raptor Rogue deck or mid-range Rogue, would see play. I think it's a pretty reasonable card. So in Constructed, both Wild and Standard, I rate this pretty highly. I think it's a pretty good card, just because of the extreme cool swing potential that it has, and the fact that Rogue doesn't really have a lot of good 2-drops that don't require a combo or something like that. So it's going to be pretty good. In Arena, it's amazing. You're going to pick this every time. The only card that's better in Arena is Defias Ringleader, and only if you have the coin, right? So this card's going to be insane, I think, in Arena. The potential of it. It's essentially 2 mana Death Rattle, draw a card, but that card could be some insane card. That's pretty good. Yeah, I rate it pretty highly all across the board. Rogue is getting a really good tool with this one. So Zeril Poisoned Mind is the new Rogue legendary. So Battlecry and Death Rattle, add a random toxin card to your hand. So again, with GVG leaving the format, we're losing the spare parts, right? So essentially, it seems that the toxin cards are kind of replacing the spare part. They're 1 mana spells that do effects. So here are the toxins. So draw a card, return a friendly minion to your hand. It costs 2 less, which is basically, Shadow Step. Really good for, like, for example, Fatigue Rogue or I guess something like that. It's really good for... what the fuck is the name? It's really good for Mill Rogue. Fire Bloom Toxin, deal 2 damage, give a minion +3 attack, and give a friendly minion stealth until your next turn. So, I mean, these have pretty good effects. I mean, the Fade Leaf Toxin, the give a minion stealth, the stealth spare part was pretty much the best spare part anyway, so it's good to see that they're bringing that one back. That's pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see what can be done with this. Although it's kind of interesting that the stealth spare part was only good because of the fact that you could, well, it was mostly good because of the fact that you could use it on Antonidas, and you could do that as a mage, right? So Zarill is a rogue card specifically, so it will be interesting to see if Zarill is going to be the only card that can generate these new spare parts, toxins, right? If so, then this card is actually not that great as a 4 mana 3/2. Of course, the stats are horrible. And yes, you're adding 2 random toxin cards to your hand, ideally, but you also don't get to choose which toxin goes into your hand, much like with spare parts. So because of that, it becomes a little bit less good because you can't exactly control the situation in which you use the spare part. And unlike certain cards that produced spare parts before in GVG, Zarill has horrible stats and is going to basically not even be a nuisance to your opponent at all, not even a minor nuisance at 4 mana. So it would have been cool to see an effect like Battlecry and Death Rattle discover a spare part. Now I know that discover is something that was used only in League of Explorers, but it would have been cool to see an effect like that instead of add a random toxin. But it will be interesting to see if the toxins are going to come to the neutral cards as well, or possibly even to other rogue cards. And if so, I think that these are pretty cool effects. Deal 2 damage is really cool. Give a minion +3 attack is really cool. Of course, drawing a card for 1 mana. Considering that 2 cards is generally worth about 3 mana, I'm of course using Arcane Intellect as a comparison. 1 mana draw a card is pretty good. And of course, the stealth is always going to be insane, right? So it would be pretty cool to see to play this card. I would, however, like to see the toxins built into other cards in the set as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. In Constructed, I think that due to the fact that this card is statted so terribly, and the fact that you can't choose the toxin that comes out, it's average. I think you would run this in a mid-range rogue like a Raptor rogue deck, and you would be happy to copy the Death Rattle off of Zarill with your Raptor, but other than that, I don't see it seeing much play. So in Wild and Standard, it's mediocre, and in Arena, it's pretty good. I think you would pick this because it's essentially 4 mana 3/2, draw 2 cards, and that's pretty good, and some of these effects are pretty insane, so... I mean, you could get the Blood Thistle Toxin and even use it on Zarill if you wanted to. And again, try again for another specific spare part. I keep saying spare part, but I mean Toxin. But so yeah, it'll be interesting to see this card. I think it'll see play in Arena. I think it'll see play in certain mid-range constructed rogue decks. And I hope that these toxins are built into other cards as well. We'll have to wait and see. Alright, on to Hunter. So 8 mana 8/8 Giant Sandworm. Whenever this minion kills another minion, it may attack again. Now that seems crazy. 8 mana 8/8, kill a minion, and you can just keep going. Kill, 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 kill. Of course, if it hits face, then it loses that particular value. What's interesting though is that this card does not have charge. But to be fair to Blizzard, that would have been insane, right? Because King Crush already exists as a 9 mana 8/8 with charge, and this an 8 mana 8/8 with charge, and whenever you kill a minion, you can attack again. That would be insane, right? Even at 10 mana, I think that would be insane. Essentially, it's a better Ice Howl. And I don't think that they would ever print a card like that. That being said, Giant Sandworm in Constructed is just a garbage card. You would never play this card. It doesn't have any kind of effect that's useful. Essentially, it's just going to get BGH'd. And, you know, there have been some nerfs proposed to BGH, like maybe BGH will go to 5 mana when Standard is released, and then it'll be 5 mana, destroy anything with 7 or more attack. Still, eating 5 of your opponent's mana is not a good enough reason to run Giant Sandworm in your deck, in my opinion. I don't see this card seeing a lot of play, even with the Beast tag. It's just not good enough. It's too slow. It's just going to get BGH'd or removed, and you're going to be sad. But that being said, so in Arena, you would, again, going back to what I said before, you would pick Fossilized Devilsaur, you would pick Ironbark Protector, and in Hunter, you would pick Giant Sandworm as your late game card. It's reasonable. So in Arena, you know, it's good. It's a little bit above average, I would say, in Arena. So, not bad. But in Constructed, no, just you wouldn't play it. It's just too slow, and it's just not good enough. 3 mana card, Infest. Give all of your minions Death Rattle and a random beast to your hand. So this is pretty cool in the fact that it essentially means that you don't have to run Web Spinner anymore. Now, of course, you might still choose to run Web Spinner because it's a 1 mana card that can be played on 1, which is really cool. However, Infest is going to give all of your minions that same effect of adding a random beast to your hand. And given the fact of all the beast synergy in Hunter, I think that this is a pretty insane card. I mean, it gives you the ability to then play a beast and then kill command. And of course, you're generating a lot of value, right? So how many beasts do you have to generate in order to kind of get your value from this card? Well, if you look at it, it costs 3 mana, right? And if you play a card in Mage, of course, like Arcane Intellect, you pay 3 mana and you draw 2 cards that you put in your deck. Now, generally, cards that you put in your own deck are going to be better than a random beast. However, it's still kind of like 3 mana draw 2. So that being said, now, of course, you're also not drawing the 2 immediately. Your opponent needs to kill, or you need to kill off your minions first to get those beasts, which is a little bit worse. So I would say that in order to get value out of this card, you have to have at least 3 minions on the board. But, I mean, in Hunter, like, that's not hard to do at all, right? I mean, you can even do something insane like Unleash Hounds and Unleash the Hounds for like 5 hounds, right? And then you play Infest for 6 mana total, right? And then you suddenly have like 5 Death Rattle Chargers that add beasts to your hand. That's crazy, right? And I think that a combo like that is going to be what makes this card insane in Constructed. So I'm rating this card pretty damn highly. The fact that it works with Lock and Load is even more insane. So I think that this card is going to be one of the awesome tools that Hunter needs. Because remember, Hunter is also losing some pretty cool tools in from GVG that they had before, like, of course, Glaive Zuka, which was one of the staple cards of Face Hunter, right? So a card like this adding so much value to all of basically a lot of your cards. I think that this card alone would be reason enough to run 2 copies of Unleash the Hounds in any kind of mid-range Hunter deck. But it'll be interesting. I mean, this is also a more controlling card, so it'll be interesting to see what other cards come out for Hunter. It's quite possible that we could see a more controlling Hunter also finally emerge as competitively viable, but who knows? I mean, but still, I mean, this card's generating intense value, so I think it will definitely see play in a mid-range Hunter kind of deck. And it'll be interesting to see if it makes it into like a Face Hunter or something like that as well. Like, again, Face Hunter usually runs 2 copies of Unleash, and Face Hunter often runs into the problem of running out of cards. This is an extremely awesome way to combat that problem, right? Again, Unleash the Hounds, Infest. that's pretty insane, right? In Arena, I think that you would also pick this card pretty highly. Even if you only have 2 minions out on the board, you're drawing 2 random beasts, that's good enough. In Arena, that's good enough. So I'm rating this pretty highly in Arena as well. Okay, on to Shaman. So 5 mana, 4/6. Stat line is pretty reasonable. So the effect, if the effect is even reasonably reasonable, that's pretty good. So what is the effect? So whenever your spells deal damage, restore that much health to your hero. That's insane, right? Now, of course, right now everyone is freaking out thinking like, oh my god, if you play like Halaziel and Lightning Storm, like, oh my god, you could restore up to like 20 some health, right? Like if the opponent's board is full. That's insane, right? This is like Reno Jackson. Only better because you don't have to run a shitty deck in order to get it to activate, right? But yeah, I mean, this card is really good. I really like this card's design. Of course, you can do some friendly fire as well and restore health to yourself if you want to run something like Elemental Destruction and clear the board. And even if you do some friendly fire, you're restoring health, so you're kind of getting value out of your minions, so it's not the worst thing in the world, and actually it kind of justifies running Elemental Destruction, whereas before it would clear your own board as well. In this case, you're sort of getting value out of those minions by restoring the health, so it's not really all that terrible. But, you know, I mean, I think that this card is pretty good. I think it will see a lot of run in like kind of a mid-range Shaman, but as a lot of other people have already pointed out, mid-range Shaman doesn't really exist anymore. It's not really competitively viable. Most people that are running competitively on the ladder these days are, of course, playing Face Shaman, and a card like this I don't think would see play in Face Shaman. I could be wrong. I mean, it might make it into the Face Shaman deck simply because of all the direct damage spells, but I think that this card really, really wants to be comboed with AoE, so it's looking at more of a mid-range deck, so I don't see it seeing a lot of play in like a Face Shaman, but again, I could be wrong. It might have, the effect might be that powerful where you would actually want to include it, especially where you're using something like Doomhammer, where you're actually using your face to take damage. Ideally, you won't be taking damage, but if your opponent has a lot of taunts or something like that, it could be problematic. But definitely in the mid-range decks. But again, we need to see what the rest of the set looks like to see if this card is actually any good, to see that if they're releasing more tools for like a mid-range Shaman deck that would make it, again, competitively viable. Everyone thought when Totem Golem came out that, oh my god, mid-range Shaman's going to be the new thing. And people tried it out, and ultimately they decided that it's essentially still worse Paladin. And so everyone went back to playing Paladin, and they kind of forgot about mid-range Shaman, so which was sad. In Arena, this card, of course, depends on how many spells you've drafted. I personally wouldn't draft this card unless I had already drafted a lot of spells. But if you happen to pick it up near the end of the run with a decent amount of damage-dealing spells, I mean, 5 mana, 4/6 is not a terrible stat line. I think it's good enough where you would just pick it up. Yeah, not bad. Good card. Okay, on to my favorite class, Warlock. So 10 mana, Doom, destroy all minions and draw a card for each. This card is horrible. Let's explain why. So, of course, let's start with Constructed. So, in Constructed, you have access to Twisting Nether, which is 8 mana, destroy all minions. Now, of course, you don't have the effect draw a card for each, but that's what Life Tap is for, right? You can do your 8 mana freaking Twisting Nether, and then 2 mana draw a card for 2 damage. Not bad. Doom destroys all minions, and you can draw up to, like 14 cards, depending on how... You can draw like half your deck, based on how many minions both you and your opponent have on the board. Now, that sounds good, but remember, of course, the maximum hand size is 10, so you're going to be burning a lot of cards if you do that. But also, the kind of deck that wants to run Doom is more of a control Warlock deck, like Handlock, right? Or like Reno. And you really, really don't want to draw too many cards when you're playing a control deck. You want to draw cards, but you don't want to draw a huge amount of cards, especially if you think a specific matchup is going to go to fatigue. right? Because you don't want to put yourself so far behind fatigue that you just lose the game because your opponent still has the ability to remove all your minions, and then you're going to lose to fatigue damage. It's just not good, right? Especially if you're going to find yourself burning cards, that's even worse. So it's situational. Twisting Nether is not situational. It costs less mana. You can still draw cards with your hero power and play Reno Jackson to basically mitigate all that damage that you're taking anyway. So I don't see Doom seeing basically any play. It's just not good enough in Constructed. Now, in Arena, destroy all minions and draw a card for each is reasonable, but still, it costs 10 mana. It's too slow. Your opponent, of course, even in Constructed, you need to think about the fact that you play Doom, even with like a Thaurissan discount, you can't really play anything after playing Doom, whereas you can play Twisting Nether and you can pay a 2-mana card or a 3-mana card that's been discounted with Thaurissan. But with Doom, you can't really play anything after you play it. Your opponent gets the first move, you lose a lot of tempo. Yeah, you draw a lot of cards, but it's, again, you're just putting yourself further into fatigue. You can draw cards with your hero power anyway. It's just not good enough. In Arena, it's just way too slow also. You're giving your opponent the tempo advantage when you play this card. It might save you for a turn or two, but overall, it's not going to save you in the end. It's just too slow. Yeah, it's not good. 2-mana Renounce Darkness. Replace your hero power and warlock cards with another class's. The cards cost 1 less. Well, I'm optimistic about this card simply because of the fact that I want to run some fun decks with this card specifically. I want to run like all the Warlock class cards and then just play Renounce Darkness, and then suddenly I get a bunch of Hunter cards and the Hunter hero power and I just smork. Like, there's going to be some amazing Trollden moments that come out of this. But I have to evaluate the card on what it is competitively, and in Constructed, this card is just not good. I mean, if you could choose the class that the hero power, if you could choose the class and hero power that you want to use, that would be significantly better than this card is currently. So this is just going to give you any random classes cards, or any random classes hero power and any random classes cards. Now, yeah, the cards are going to cost 1 mana less, which is, of course, essentially like up to a lot of mana in value, right? You consider the fact that on turn 1, you have 3 cards in your hand. You draw 1, that's 4. You draw another one, that's 5. You play Renounce Darkness, and you essentially get like 25 mana or something crazy like that in value. Now, of course, that's assuming that you draw all the cards in your deck, right? And of course, that's also assuming that literally all of the cards in your deck are Warlock cards, which is, let's just say what it is, impossible, right? Now, I mean, I think it's a reasonable card. Like, you might run it. Some people have brought up the fact that the Warlock hero power is terrible in a fatigue game, right? Because it's just the worst one to have. So you might just literally run 1 copy of this card in a control Warlock deck, like Reno, for example, simply to get rid of your hero power when you're either at low health or when you need to stop drawing cards. And you might hope to get something like a Priest hero power or a Warrior hero power that can armor up, not even necessarily worrying about the fact that your Warlock cards are going to change to another class, but just to get rid of the hero power. But that being said, like, if you haven't played cards like Jiraxxus yet or something like that, and even if you have played Jiraxxus, you really don't want to change your hero power anyway, so that's pretty bad, right? So I'm looking to like play around with this and just kind of like really fun decks, but I don't see this really being competitively viable. I think the Warlock cards are so good, especially cards like Jiraxxus and the Jiraxxus hero power, that you really don't want to change those hero powers, or you don't want to change those cards to something else that might be like shitty 1 mana cards. And yeah, you can play them for free then after that, but they're still shitty cards, right? Like, you could get Paladin and you could get like 20 secrets and then you'd be like really, really super sad, right? It could happen. I just don't see if you could like specifically choose like the hero power and all the cards, that would be awesome, like an arena draft. But of course, like your opponent would concede from just boredom before that ever happened, and that would be insane, right? So of course, that's not what this card is, and because of that, I don't think that this card's going to see play even in control Warlock decks. It's just not good enough. In Arena, though, I mean, I think that the Warlock hero power is strong in Arena, and because of that, it's not even going to see play there. But I could be wrong. I certainly wouldn't pick it in Arena.